Hello, welcome to Retail Automotive Professional Series offered by Evolve Performance Group. In this installment, we're going to talk about what drives client decisions. I'm your host, Jeff Tabobin. I've had the good fortune to work in the automotive industry for many years. I've worked on the retail side of the business, financial services, worked with OEMs, also worked with dealership groups across the country. So my goal is to bring you some of the learnings in my career, and hopefully they'll help advance your career and help you build a better relationship with your clients. So let's talk about how we make decisions. During my career, I had the opportunity to work for the Gallup organization. Some of you may know Gallup as a polling company. What a lot of folks don't know is that Gallup is a prestigious consulting company that works in the field of behavioral economics, primarily with Fortune 1000 companies around the globe. Now, what this means is the behavioral economics is understanding how relationships with employees and relationships with clients drive financial performance in organizations. One of the things that Gallup has learned is that when it comes to people making decisions, about 70% of our decision-making process is emotional versus 30% being rational. During my time at Gallup, we had a senior scientist named Dr. Danny Kahneman. Dr. Kahneman earned a Nobel Prize in 2002 for mapping human decision-making. And what was unique about his Nobel Prize is that he was a psychologist earning a prize in economics, and that's never happened before. And so Dr. Kahneman and Amos Tversky put together this theory that said this is how people actually decide on things and how they make decisions. Since that work, Dr. Kahneman has published a book called Thinking Slow and Fast. And what he found is that there's actually two systems of thinking. One he calls System 1 thinking, which is 98% emotional, and System 2 thinking is 2% rational. Now, we're not going to dive very deep into this, but let's just suffice it to say that our clients, the majority of them, make decisions on an emotional basis. Now, to put this in context in automotive, if you think about emotional decision making, we wouldn't have luxury brands like Mercedes, Porsche, BMW, Audi, Lexus, etc. if people bought based on need, but that's not the case. And we also know that Americans have a love affair with their vehicles more so than any other country, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. So Gallup did some research. They wanted to find out in their studies is what are the things that lead back to client metrics like the amount of money somebody spends, or the profit they pay, or their loyalty, or the margins that you can expect from different types of clients. So they did a couple of studies, and one of the studies they concentrated on was in hospitality, and they were trying to find out, were clients more interested in the tangibles? In other words, like the product they get, the service they get, the price that it was, versus the intangibles, and that was like the quality of the experience. Did they feel welcome? Did they feel valued as a client? Interestingly enough, the intangibles won out. Another study they did was hooking up people to an MRI machine, and these people had high brand engagement. And when they were asked about a particular brand that they were engaged with, the emotional centers of their brains lit up. Well, Dr. Edmund Rolls found out that he could predict purchase intentions with 70% reliability going through this method. Wouldn't it be great if we could actually do an MRI on all of our clients coming to the dealership? Now, there's a couple of conclusions out of this. The first conclusion is that there's a step beyond client satisfaction. It's called client engagement. What engagement is a measure of the various emotional components of a relationship between a business and a client. So let's put this in context for us in the car business. Imagine telling a client that you're going to have their vehicle cleaned and ready at 2 p.m. and full of gas. When they pull on the lot and they see that vehicle sitting out front and it's cleaned and ready to go, they don't walk in the front door high-fiving you because you did what you promised you would do. That's an expectation. So you just met the basic expectations, and that's what satisfaction is. I'd really love for you to start thinking about client satisfaction as the absence of dissatisfaction. What that means is you just did the basics and they're not dissatisfied. If you think of it this way, you get more points taken off if you don't do what you say you're going to do versus the points you get added on for doing exactly what you said. Engagement takes it a step further. Engagement is the extra mile you went, the extra things you did to be able to drive that relationship forward. So unlike satisfaction, engagement has a direct tie to business outcomes. Things we care about in the dealership world could be billable hours, dollars per RO, dollars per retail unit, loyalty metrics, etc. We know that engagement drives that financial performance. So Gallup has identified 4 engagement levels: fully engaged, which means we own their hearts and minds and we have a relationship. Engaged is kind of a rational attachment. It makes sense to do business with you. You're close to their home, their office. They've been there before. We did an okay job, and they're going to check us against other dealerships, but likely come back. Not engaged, they're indifferent. They're going to buy wherever, whenever. They don't have a relationship with us. And then we have the actively disengaged. These people don't like us, but they still buy from us. So let's take a look at how this plays out. So let's say the line that's 100 right here is our average client. The fully engaged client is worth 23% more than the average. The engaged client's worth 7% more, and the not engaged, they're the average ones. The actively disengaged is only worth 87% of your average client. I told you they'd still buy from us, but here's the thing. We had to discount our products and services by 13% in order to get a yes. So essentially, we bought their business. Here's the issue. I even have dealerships here in my hometown that say price sells cars. If you don't have anything else to talk about, price is the only topic, and then that becomes the way that you sell the car. Here's a phrase I'd love for you to remember. Price is most relevant in the absence of a genuine relationship. If you haven't taken the time to build a relationship with your client and you haven't done the things that you need to do to build an experience, price is all you got. So let's talk about what's next. There's 3 things you could do to really help build client engagement. One is prioritize the client experience. One of the things that I like to do when I have a client show up at the dealership is I'll say, hey, do me a favor. Tell me what a great experience would look like during your visit today. One of the things that we know is we can't actually produce a great experience if we don't know what their expectations are. Also know that clients have had other experiences, whether it's a hotel, a theme park, a restaurant. People are starting to become a little bit more discerning about the experiences that they have. I saw a training video for a Mercedes store the other day, and the gentleman mentioned that the Mercedes-Benz was an aspirational purchase. I'd submit to you that every car purchase is aspirational. Whether you're a teenager and it's your first vehicle, or it's your first vehicle out of the house after graduating college, it is a status symbol. It's something that we all aspire to, is to get that next vehicle. You need to treat everyone like that's the case. And we looked at engagement numbers a moment ago. One of the things we found in luxury brands is that people that are buying the first vehicle in a luxury brand are way less engaged than people that are buying the more expensive vehicles. And we actually find that's because of treatment. So you have to think about creating that experience. Another thing I'd say to you is this, that today's clients, or 90% or more, are shopping online before they get to the dealership, and they're visiting fewer dealerships than ever. So what that means from my perspective is that people are coming to the store to buy. When they're in your dealership, they're there to buy it. I think sometimes we kind of go a little crazy on building value in the vehicle. What we know from our research from clients is they want you to have an expert level of product knowledge, but they want it applied to their specific needs. So think about that. Maybe the full walk around isn't all that important, but you are hitting on the key components that matter most to them. And you can only understand what that is by asking good questions. There are 5 key drivers to engagement, 5 actions you could take or things you could do to drive a higher level of engagement. You want to start off with answering their questions in a straightforward manner. Really important to your clients. Next thing you want to do is make sure that you have their best interest at heart. Recommend options that are perfect for them. Make sure that you have a seamless flow with financial services. And last, make sure there are no surprises heading to finance. One of the things I'll challenge you on is having a straight answer for their questions. I saw a training video earlier that mentioned kind of an evasive technique where the role play was the client was asking about their trade value before they did anything else in the sales process. And we came up with a whole word track on how to avoid having that conversation. Here's another perspective for you. If that's a stumbling point for your client or something that's very important, why not deal with it up front? If you're miles away on the trade, it doesn't make sense to spend a whole lot of time in the sales process trying to get them to love the car before you give them that information, because you could go through an entire demo drive, walk around, all kinds of antics to be able to get to the same point that you could have started at and resolved right up front. The other thing that happens is a lot of times when a client asks a question, we perceive it as an objection, and that's not the case. So for instance, if the client says, "What's the interest rate?" We've got a whole word track that kind of walks around the subject rather than just answering the question. "Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Client, we figure all of our deals here at 7.9%. That's the average rate for our dealership. If you qualify for better, it could be lower." And just move on. If the client says, "Hey, I am not doing 7.9%, now you have something to deal with. Otherwise, it's just a point of information. So think about your processes, and are you equipped to answer questions in a straightforward fashion? The third thing you need to do is figure out what makes you different. Why would somebody buy from you versus the competitor down the street? We're in a commoditized industry, which means clients can get our product virtually anywhere. So what makes you different? One of the things you could do is set yourself apart by asking great questions. I'd like you to think about your client walking in the dealership with a box of puzzle pieces in their hand, and on those puzzle pieces, it says things like $5,000 down, $900 a month, 2020 trade-in, 3 kids, and your job is to put those puzzle pieces together and clear the runway for them to be able to buy what they want. When you're going about it this way, you're actually demonstrating that you're putting your client's best interest in mind. You're really working on building a genuine relationship with them. And then it also elevates you to trusted advisor status. And you'll know when you hit that status because they'll ask you, "What do you think I ought to do?" And then you have a fiduciary responsibility to respond the exact appropriate way, and not the way that you would want them to, but the way that you think is the best for them based on your professional experience. Lastly, you need to figure out how you create wow. What's the thing that you do that sets your personal brand as a sales consultant apart? For me, I used to go pick up my clients' vehicles for service. I couldn't do it 100% of the time, but I did it a lot, and I got a lot of referrals. We had one scenario where we bought a car, and the sales consultant put a birthday card in that vehicle for myself, and he called us 3 months later on my birthday and said, "By the way, if you go open the first aid kit, there's a card in there," and the card had a certificate for dinner at a local restaurant. So that was his kind of a way of doing things special. So what's your way? What have you come up with? I hope you found this information helpful. We'll catch you next time on the Retail Automotive Professional Series.